There's this debate that's been going on for years all over the internet. Maybe you've caught wind of it. See, a lot of people think we shouldn't name genres after the games that exemplify them. And the people in this unofficial renaming committee are really adamant about it too. They will stop at nothing to tell everybody just how much they hate genre names like Metroidvania and Soulslike. We covered the Metroidvania thing a while back, and the plan was to do the same thing with Soulslikes. But forget about all that, cause guess what? Even if you came up with the coolest name ever to replace Metroidvania, like I did, that word's not going anywhere. It's just too far embedded into the cultural zeitgeist of video games. I think if you're gonna complain about terms like Metroidvania and Soulslike, you should apply those same critical thinking skills to all the other genre names. Because if you take the time to think about them, a lot of genre names are straight up nonsense. And that's interesting to me. As long as the genre isn't named after a video game, the renaming committee doesn't think twice about it. They take it at face value and accept it without question. So that pretty much means the genre names themselves don't matter in the slightest, as long as the games in that genre have the same things in common, and as long as it doesn't come from the title of a game, the name can be anything. Before I continue, I just want to say that the point of this video is to tell people about something that I think is cool. But in no way am I trying to convince anyone of anything or change anyone's mind. This is not a call to action. But definitely like, comment, and subscribe if you're having a good time. And at the end of the day, isn't that why we're here? To have a good time while thinking more deeply about this thing that we're all passionate about: video games. Now, if you're not here to have a good time, and you try and start some shit in the comments, you're gone. You will never get the time you spent writing that stupid ass comment back, so keep that in mind. With that out of the way, let's get this party started. As it turns out, there's only one reason why some people think you shouldn't name a genre after a game. Take Metroidvanias, right? We need a so-called real genre name for that because you need to be familiar with either Metroid or Castlevania to know how those kinds of games are supposed to work. According to the renaming committee, you shouldn't need any other information besides the name of the genre to understand the style of gameplay that it describes. At one point in time, that made a lot of sense to me, but after thinking about it for a while, I realized that entire argument was in fact riggedy-diggedy-diculous. Thing is, all genres require a pretty significant amount of knowledge to comprehend how they work, and that goes for all mediums, including books, movies, and music. Sure, you might be able to understand a genre on an intellectual level if you look up a definition on Wikipedia or something, right? But I feel like you can't fully grasp the concept until you've seen it in action. And just looking at one example isn't going to cut it. You need at least 2 different works in a genre to really figure it out. The more examples you have, the better, obviously, but it's a 2-drink minimum. You need to be able to draw comparisons between the two because the genre is defined by the things they have in common. In the case of video games, you need to be familiar with at least 2 similar games to understand what genre they fall into. But you might even need a 3rd game from a completely different genre to confirm your observations, like a one of these things is not like the other type situation. So no matter what, you actually need a lot of prior information to know what kind of game a genre is describing. That's why I think Metroidvania is actually an amazing name for a genre, because not only does it immediately give you 2 games that you can draw comparisons between, it also gives newcomers a history lesson, thus preventing the world from forgetting about the legendary games that changed the industry forever. Now, I say that, right? But observe, as I contradict my previous statement with the most controversial thing I've ever said on this channel. And I'm no stranger to courting controversy. Hell, me and Controversy got 3 kids together. Alright, here it is. In my opinion, the Metroidvania and the Soulslike shouldn't be considered genres in the first place, because their mechanics are just minor additions to genres that already existed, and that doesn't justify a new separate genre being made to describe those specific mechanics. So now everybody on the planet hates me, right? It's cool though. It's cool. 'Cause I get it. Nobody likes taking a direct hit to the ego. It ain't easy to admit that you could be wrong about something, especially when you thought you were an expert. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. You are here. That's what led to this situation. When you think you know everything, you stop asking questions, and that causes knowledge and understanding to stagnate. My job is to drag you down here into my domain, the Valley of Despair, so that we can figure this shit out as a team. And you know what team stands for, don't you? That's right. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sarah. If you wanted to know when Metroidvanias and Soulslikes were gonna get real genre names, I can tell you exactly when that'll happen. Metroidvanias and Soulslikes will get new genre names just as soon as Metroidvanias and Soulslikes stop looking like Metroidvanias and Soulslikes. The same way how people didn't start calling Doom clones first-person shooters until they stopped looking and playing like Doom. That essentially means that Soulslike and Metroidvania will never get proper-sounding names, because they're defined by extremely specific mechanics, and whenever they pop up in a game, you immediately know what the developers were inspired by. Games like Batman Arkham Asylum and Control do a pretty good job of hiding it, but at the end of the day, they're not fooling anybody. And let's not forget about the Metroid Soulsvania likes out there like Jedi Fallen Order and The Last Faith. So even when a Metroidvania is actually a Souls-like and vice versa, that game still can't step out of the shadows of the games that came before it. And that's why the terms Metroidvania and Souls-like are here to stay. The thing that nobody on the renaming committee takes into consideration is the fact that Metroidvanias and Souls-likes are subgenres, and the genres that they're derived from are themselves subgenres. Part of the problem is that people tend to treat each game genre as being separate and distinct from all the others, and that makes perfect sense. After all, the reason why we have these genres in the first place is because the gameplay styles they describe are so wildly different from each other.
But what if I told you that most of the genres that you can name off the top of your head are actually subgenres of something else?
Well, guess what? They are. Let's look at some of the different game genres out there. You got platformers, shooters, which includes the scrolling first and third person varieties. There's fighting games, puzzle games, that's a good one. Rhythm games, you hardly hear anybody talk about those anymore. What else? Racing, gotta have that. What's life without a little vroom vroom every now and then, right? All of these unique and distinct genres are in fact subgenres of something else. Not only that, but they're all subgenres of the same overarching supergenre. And that's crazy to me because that means that all the games that these words describe are technically in the same genre. What is this amazing supergenre that can apparently do everything, you ask? It's the action game, a term so vague it barely describes anything at all, which is exactly why it eventually deviated into so many subgenres. So what even is an action game? Well, basically, it's just a game where you have to press a certain button within a certain amount of time in order to prevent the game from telling you that you suck big fat donkey balls. That's it. The game's gonna show you something on screen, and you have to react accordingly to whatever that is within a particular time frame. And if you fail to do that...
Loser! You're a loser! Are you feeling sorry for yourself? Well, you should be, because you are dirt!
If giving genres a correct and proper name really mattered, then maybe we should actually be calling them reaction games, because the entire genre is based on putting your reaction times to the test. But it doesn't matter, so we're not gonna do that. We should, but we're not gonna. Even though we should. Because it's a reaction game, technically. On the other end of the spectrum are games that don't tax your reaction times or hand-to-eye coordination at all. Strategy games that are strictly turn-based are designed to test your decision-making skills, while adventure games test your abilities of logic and reasoning. And they're called adventure games even though they revolve around solving puzzles, but we can't call them puzzle games because that is a completely different genre that's actually a subgenre of action games. Anyway, the thing that sets adventure games apart from action games is the fact that they give you as much time as you need to finish the job. And that brings us to action-adventure. These games have both reaction-based gameplay and puzzle solving in some combination. In terms of playtime, it could be a 60-40 split or 75-25, but it's rarely 50-50. Honestly, I don't even think it's possible to split it right down the middle because the way these games are usually made, one of the gameplay styles is mostly just there to change things up. So the game might be primarily an action game, and then you'll have shorter puzzle segments to break up the monotony. Alright, looks like we covered a lot of ground. You must be feeling pretty good about yourself right about now. Maybe you think it's about time for you to start climbing out of this valley of despair. But no, that would be a terrible mistake. Because just when you think you got a pretty solid grasp on game genres and their conventions, people have to go and make things weird. Back in 2010, Atlus released a teaser trailer for the Persona team's first game on the PS3, Catherine. At the time, I was a massive Persona fan, so I was crazy excited for what I thought was going to be another kick-ass RPG in HD on the PS3. And let me tell you something, Atlus knew damn well that the fans were looking forward to a Persona-style game on the PS3. Because a few months later, they released their first gameplay trailer. and there was a huge build-up to the reveal. Then there was a big title card that said something like, "What kind of game is the Persona team's first HD project? It's an action puzzler." It really said that. Like, the trailer itself couldn't even believe it. That description has since been amended because if you look the game up on Steam, you'll see that it's being marketed as an action-adventure puzzle game. And the game's wiki calls it a puzzle platformer, which I think is actually the best name for it, but either way, that game's all over the place in terms of genres. I didn't have a problem with it at the time, but that was my first encounter with seeing the word action being used as an adjective to describe what was already an action game. And looking back on it now, that's really weird. Puzzle games are a subgenre of action games, so calling something an action puzzle game just sounds like it's got action on top of action. Like, how exciting is this game? Am I about to have a heart attack?
I'm gonna pass out.
I think we can all agree that the tirade I just went on was completely unnecessary, just like calling a game an action puzzler. I think we can do better. But in the time since Catherine was released, the gaming industry doubled down on this naming convention, and now we have genre names like action platformer. What does that even mean? I mean, I know what it means, I just think it's stupid. And apparently other people do too, which is why in certain parts of the world it's called a combat platformer. There's one more thing about video game genres that I think is super weird, but it's also really interesting. Check this out. We call action-oriented games with a heavy amount of puzzle solving action-adventure, right? These are games like The Legacy of Zorldink, Tom Brady, and Dad of Boy. Now look at something like Half-Life 2. That game has just as much, if not more, puzzle solving than some of the other games I mentioned, and the first-person shooter is a subgenre of action game. And yet, I have never seen a game described as an FPS adventure. There are plenty of first-person puzzle games like Portal and the Talos Principle, but as soon as you add guns into the mix, the shooting takes priority over everything else, even if the game has you solving puzzles more than pulling the trigger. That's interesting, right? It's like game genres follow a rigid set of linguistic rules, and it's ungrammatical for FPS to have a prefix or a suffix, unless it's another acronym. That's why you can have an FPS RPG, but not an FPS platformer. You can have an FPS with a heavy focus on platforming, and you might even see the platformer tag on its Steam page, but it'll always be seen as a first-person shooter, regardless of any other mechanics that might be included. Think about that.
No, I mean really, think about it. I want you to think about it every waking hour like I do. And just like me, I hope it keeps you up at night, to the point where every time you try and close your eyes, your dreams are haunted by the words Action FPS.
Even if a genre name doesn't make a whole lot of sense, the name itself can be anything, as long as that name serves its purpose as a genre. And genres in any medium have two purposes, one for consumers and one for creators. Consumers use game genres to figure out their preferences. Once you know what kinds of games you're into, it's easy to find similar games that you might also enjoy, more likely than if you had just picked a game at random. Understanding people's preferences is big business too. The tags feature on Steam is a thriving-ass ecosystem with hundreds of different content descriptors that were specifically made to help people find exactly what they're looking for. On the creator side of things, a genre gives you a convenient list of other works that you can use for research or inspiration. A genre also helps you establish your gameplay mechanics early in development, and that saves your studio time and money in the long run. Do you have any idea how many millions upon millions of dollars are flushed down the toilet because the dev team is being led by some upwards failing nepo baby who doesn't understand genre conventions? Well, the chances of that exact scenario happening are pretty slim, but it could happen. You don't know. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, right. As long as the genre name does both of those things, the name itself doesn't matter one bit. But I don't want anybody to misconstrue that as me saying that genres themselves don't matter, because that is completely false. As you'll discover in the coming weeks on this channel, in my opinion, genres are the most important topic when it comes to discussing games as an art form. Unfortunately, there are several game genres that don't serve the purposes that they're supposed to. So next time around, I'm going to take on the Grand Master, the Big Kahuna, the original genre Pimp Daddy Mac, the RPG. You do not want to miss that, so you know the drill. Sub the dub, ring the ding, and don't forget to tip your waitresses.